You still hobbling around, Nate?
Yeah, well, some days are better than others.
That's good. You're not on.
Here's all the extras you need.
Yeah, I got a whole ton of coffee good.
These are.
This is the file of extras.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for engineering.
Which time you use like the final test or?
The like a licensing test. Yeah, I took it back in April. I did not pass in April.
You did not.
So I'm studying all over again.
Oh.
So yeah, it was my reaction, my response when you asked me in
We're supposed to take one.
not April, May about it and like how I thought about it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean I was close to passing, but I wasn't like quite close to passing.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Second time's a charm.
Yep, I'm taking the transportation one now, so
Nick, you coming?
We haven't heard back from our
passing
our
rate
who
one.
wanted to take the reins
What
and
did you do the first time?
we're having construction.
Yeah. Construction's like 55% passing.
It is her,
Transportation's like mid-70s.
Oh.
72.
I don't think we're
I
gonna
did
see that.
transportation, so I
It's
passed.
a little more straightforward. I'm already realizing.
Yeah. Oh good.
Yeah.
thank you.
When you gotta take that?
Alright, let's call this to order and get it going. Do you have any additions to the agenda?
No additions.
Okay. And motion to approve. We'll do that. Motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright. Do you have any visitors to be heard? Nope. Okay. On to the public hearing for the conditional use permit to Apex Towers, 1260 South Main Street. Nate?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have in front of you a very complete packet of information from Apex Towers and Bill Consulting about a proposed telecommunications tower on the south end of town. This will be located on the Bruce Olson construction property. There's a lease on that property for this tower. Telecommunications towers have a special section of our zoning ordinances, so this memo is a little more in depth than you're probably used to, but it has specific requirements related only to telecommunications towers. In the memo, I've noted what some of those differences are. Some of them are not applicable simply because of where this is, like driveway, site distance. They're not changing anything with that property with regard to access to Main Street. So I wouldn't say that there's anything there that really requires them to do anything different. They do intend to have a gravel driveway leading to the tower, as well as one gravel maintenance spot. Under this chapter, driveway and parking spaces need to be concrete and asphalt. As gravel is only approved for storage and construction supplies. I think the planning commission can still approve this permit with that in mind, and we can clarify some of the parking and access plan issues later. I did speak with the applicant earlier to speak about some of those issues. I'm not even convinced at this point that that necessarily applies because they're not required to have any parking space. So if that's the case, I can't necessarily say that they have to have a driveway to a parking space that doesn't exist. But I would propose that we just handle that throughout the building permit process. And I'll remind the commission as well that I was charged with researching this issue earlier this year in terms of the use of milled asphalt as the approved surface in light industrial, heavy industrial, and a couple other areas. So I think that's something that's relevant to mention here. 1205, there's no building being erected, so I would suggest that that parking space again is not required. 06, the only signs for the facility are going to be the identification and warning signs. So they have to identify the operator of the tower for FCC license rules. A couple other items that they could have safety warnings on there and so on and so forth. Will be a 7-foot fence with barbed wire around the tower. 1209, they met all the requirements of that, and 1211, I would say that is not applicable as no new properties being added. There's two issues that I think we need to clarify prior to approval. But I'll just mention here quick, the other one, the first one is that gravel driveway issue. The FCC licensure, I think we should require that to be received prior to approval of a building permit for the tower. I know that's already in process. The FAA requirements are also in process for certain heights of towers and other structures. My recommendation today is going to be motion to approve a conditional use permit. We do have the applicant here tonight, and they've got a lot of information. I didn't know if you were on board docs or you've looked at this sheet here, this packet with Field Consulting on it. They went through line by line for the requirements of our ordinances and answered every one of those questions to my satisfaction. Again, the one outlier is the gravel driveway issue, which I believe can be resolved at a later date. You guys wish to add anything?
So I tried looking at the plan on my phone, but it was hard to see everything, but.
And there are additional construction sets here for.
Okay.
Okay, well, we have some full-size copies of that, just you.
Are there, I'll take a look at one. Are there guidelines coming down from it or anything, or?
There's no guide wires
Yeah.
coming from it, it's a self-support tower.
Okay. And then it was about 200 foot tall, I think I saw in there. 199.
Yeah, with the lightning rod, it's 199 feet
Yeah.
tall.
I'm guessing you guys do this for a living, so is there any concern with it being that close to the road? I see it was about 218 feet from the road, you know, so like during the winter, I've driven by, it's a lot bigger tower, but a tower by Rowena, where if there's been an ice storm and the wind's blowing from the right direction, I mean, cars are getting pelted with ice chunks, and, you know, is there any concern of that, being that close to the road?
218 feet is quite a distance, so I think it would be minimal at best and very rare occasions that would happen. But it's a possibility, but very rare circumstances that would take place. I do have a short presentation if you would prefer that, Mr. Vice Chairman, or if you want to just do the Q&A format. I do want to for sure cover a couple sections.
Yeah, if there's a couple points you want to make, that'd probably be good.
Okay. I'll just buzz through the kind of the normal presentation. Again, good evening, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Kevin Wilson, the Field Consulting, representing Apex Towers. I'd like to thank Mr. Vanderplat for his assistance with the ordinance and navigating your process here. I would like to just go through quickly some of the code requirements that we identified. And first off, the proposed facility does consist of a 100 by 100 foot leased area, which will contain a 195 foot tall tower with a 4 foot lightning rod that comes to 199 feet. The 100 by 100 area is sufficient space to allow for what we would consider 4 typical co-locators. So it's got plenty of size and area to expand as additional wireless providers are interested in providing service to the city in the future. The first tenant, which we believe most likely will be U.S. Cellular, and that would allow them to greatly enhance. I don't think they have any signal here at all right now, so they would be allowed to, if they co-locate in this tower, to provide service to the city of Lennox and, more importantly, compete with the other service providers in the area for the business of the residents and the businesses and visitors that come through the area. So your code does define telecommunications towers as self-supporting lattice, guide lattice, or monopole structures which support wireless communications facility. And as we've already established, this is a self-support tower. So there's no guide wires, no guide anchors, or anything like that. The Section 902 of the zoning regulations includes a table that lists all of the conditional uses that are allowed in a light industrial district and the applicable standards that shall be applied. The first conditional use that's listed in that table is telecommunication towers. And the applicable standards to that are Section 12.09, 02, 04, 05, 06, 12.11, and 1901. Section 9.03 lists the yard requirements, and they are 10 feet from the side and rear lot lines and 25 feet from the front. We meet the side and the rear lot line setbacks exactly at 10 feet, and as already mentioned, 218 feet from the front property line. So that's quite a substantial setback. The code in section 12.09A requires a minimum distance of 300 feet from the tower to the nearest residentially zoned property, which of course is the high school to the west. And that comes in at 319 feet 8 inches, so that criteria is met. The code under section 1209B requires a minimum distance of a half a mile between telecommunication towers, and this condition is also met. 12.09C, we've already touched on this, requires that we provide the FCC and any FAA approvals prior to the issuance of a building permit, and Apex Towers has no concerns about this, as was mentioned. The applications have already been submitted, they're in the works, and we absolutely will submit those documents prior to the issuance of any building permits. 1209D states the maximum height for the telecommunication tower if it is made to accommodate 2 or more users as being 200 feet, shall not exceed 200 feet. And again, we're coming in at 199 feet, so that condition is met. 12.09E requires the tower to be constructed in such a way that it's inaccessible to unauthorized people. And this condition is met. The compound will be surrounded by 7 feet tall chain link fence with a row of barbed wire, and the gate will be locked. Section 12.02A and B covers the intersection and driveway safety zones, and the proposed facility is in compliance with both of these requirements. Just a few more here. I'm going to skip over 12.04A for a moment and jump ahead to 12.04B. This has to do with the required parking space and the material. So 12.04B is titled Required Parking Spaces. It includes a table that lists the parking spaces that are required depending on the type of the use. The table includes a list of single and multifamily dwellings, bowling alleys, churches, schools, clubs, bars, restaurants, nursing homes, hotels, funeral homes, and retail businesses. All of these uses have one thing in common, and that would be a lot of daily in and out traffic, that if the access road and parking spaces were gravel, would create a lot of dust. The required parking spaces table, as I just read through the list, it's a pretty comprehensive list, but it does not anywhere in that list say telecommunications facilities or towers. And we think that that's probably by design, because telecommunications facilities have minimal, if any, daily traffic. In fact, on average, a structure like this would maybe get 2 to 3 visitors per month in a lightweight pickup truck for maintenance and just repairs and things of that nature. So as such, we would respectfully ask that the Planning Commission interpret the fact that telecommunications facility is not listed in the required parking spaces table to mean that no parking space is required. And if that is the way that the Planning Commission leans, and if we go back to 12.04A4, it addresses the surface types and required parking spaces and access drives there too. And those should be made of concrete or asphalt, which is already brought up, not materials such as gravel or loose stone. And obviously we would strongly prefer to have the access road and the turnaround at the compound be designed as with gravel, as it's shown in your plans, because it's our belief that the gravel would be more than sufficient to handle the minimal traffic needs of the telecommunications facility. And more importantly, it can handle those needs without creating any noticeable dust to the neighboring industrial properties on the 3 sides and to the school on the west. And the distance to the actual school buildings is closer to 700 feet or so. So it's our belief there would be 0 noticeable dust ever created by a vehicle going in a couple times a month. Section 1205 deals with off-road loading, off-street loading requirements. And so that section is not applicable. 1206 is already discussed, signs on the property, and again, only signs will be any kind of warning signs and identification signs that are required by law. 12.11 A through F are not applicable. 1211G specifies the lighting standards, and those conditions are met. The only lighting will be installed within the security fencing, and then that'll be near the base of the tower, so if the service tech has to, and usually they try to do planned maintenance in the middle of the night when nobody's on the network, if they have to shut it off for an hour. Nobody notices at 2 in the morning. A lot of people would notice at 5 in the afternoon. And then, of course, any lighting that would ever be required by the FAA. Section 19.01 outlines the application and procedural requirements necessary for the issuance of a conditional use permit. We believe the requirements have been followed as part of our application, and all essential elements have been included in the CUP application that you have before you. And lastly, we believe that the proposed application is consistent with the Lennox Comprehensive Plan. Specifically in Chapter 6, it mentions technology parks as being intended uses within the industrial district, and the types of cutting-edge wireless services that a facility like this is going to be able to host and facilitate now and well into the future. For the city of Lennox and the nearby high school, definitely falls under what we would consider to be the umbrella of technology. So that was my comments. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to them. If you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them. And specifically, I'd respectfully ask if there's, again, any section in the code that you feel that perhaps isn't met, that we get the opportunity to discuss that further.
Good. The future equipment area, 30 by 18s, is that like there'd be a little building put there for the generator or, whatever the cell company needs?
Every carrier kind of has a different equipment package.
Yep.
A lot of them are like 12 by 30 prefab buildings, and they have a little generator in the back end. Some of them have equipment racks, and then the equipment's like a series of little refrigerators that sit outside, and so it depends on the carrier. But the way it's laid out, it's laid out if you have 4 of the largest footprints that wireless providers use, should be able to fit in there, maybe perhaps more.
Yeah. I guess the only question I would have, Nate, and this is more just devil's advocate than anything, is, the telecommunications aren't necessarily listed under there, but I would go to industrial use, as the only one that would apply, and it requires 1.5 spaces per maximum employees.
Employees per shift.
Right. So, like you said, there might only be 1 or 2 people there a month, but that's a maximum shift, so that's 1 person. So, by the law, or the ordinance, it would require a parking spot. But with that said, I wish we would have this asphalt thing taken care of before now.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Yes.
The list that the code, it's a pretty comprehensive list.
Right.
Is there any thought that, maybe something like this, because there really isn't any traffic, all those other uses have a ton, is there, and it's not just the little turnaround pad.
Yep.
I think this would end up being 100 and, let's see, what sheet is that? It's quite a substantial area, it'd be 150 feet east to west, and then another 80 feet north and south. It adds quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's going to be replaced every 10
like I
years.
said, I don't have any issues with it, other than we've been working on this and nobody's doing anything about it. So the longer we wait on the council side of it, taking care of stuff like that, the more of these we're going to get in that I feel bad just pushing them through when, any other business can come in and say, well, you guys keep giving other businesses a pass, That's where I'm coming. I have absolutely no problem with it being gravel. I'd rather it be asphalt, crushed asphalt, like recycled crushed, because it's lower dust than gravel and just stands up a little better. But
Mr. Vice Chair, one way you might be able to cover that if you're worried about future businesses looking at this and say, hey, you approve them.
Yep.
If a motion were to include, due to the fact that the traffic expected to this facility is 2 to 3 vehicles per month,
Yep.
that's a special circumstance, and as such, the planning commission finds that it's acceptable. Because then, the whole thing, I think, is dust control.
Yeah.
I would assume, and,
Yeah.
if a different business where, I can't think of any that only have 1 or 2 vehicles per month and stay in business, but
Yeah.
if there were such a thing, then,
What's the, why would you guys want to do anything other than gravel, I guess? I mean, would you guys consider asphalt millings, or is it more for drainage? Or just a filter, just so I can drain water easier, or what's the?
I think it's probably all of those, and it's not, even gravel roads get flooded if there's a lot of traffic, so it's, their experience with these in rural areas is that it's very, maybe you run a grader across it every few years with this kind of traffic, and it's done, and it's acceptable for the amount of use, and blacktop and concrete, well, concrete lasts a long time, but that's extremely expensive. Bituminous you'd have to replace every, decade or so, and that's tear that all up and put it back down for water. I think it's just what's required for the site.
It is a industrial park, or light industrial park, I guess you could say. So it's within town, so a rural comparison probably isn't the best comparison, I guess. I know the ordinance kind of specifically says, any storage areas you can have gravel, and we talked about parking garages or storage facility for boats or whatever it is from asphalt millings, because there's gonna be a lot of traffic in and out, and for dust control, the asphalt millings would allow that to work. Like Brett said, that was kind of one of the big things on a previous discussion is dust control. But yeah, you're right. If there's only gonna be a couple vehicles coming in there each month, it's probably not a big deal. Is it gonna stay that way? 5-10 years down the road, with telecommunications being such a big thing, we don't even, you guys probably have a better idea than we do maybe, but 10 years down the road, maybe it's weekly then.
I started doing wireless as a 1-year project in 1995, and I was going to be out of a job. And we didn't build all the structures we needed in 1995. It shows no sign of ending, but the equipment is getting more standardized, and the maintenance carriers are extremely sensitive to having any equipment outages because customers, emergency services, outages are a big problem, and the customer service center lights up if your services are out. So they want the equipment to be extremely reliable, and it is. So I've been doing it for about 25 years now. It still stands at usually once or twice a month for routine maintenance. Occasionally you have some equipment that just goes out, like your TV goes out, and you have to, that's not planned. Whenever it goes out, they come out and do it. So that might happen once a year. So it's still incredibly rare.
Can I make motions? Or is that?
You can.
Yeah.
I prefer that.
Okay.
So that was in the chair does.
I move that we accept the proposal.
Is that with pending anything, or are we just accepting it outright?
Well, I'm okay with the gravel, if that is the only issue that anybody has.
When they do the building permit, is that based, because, this is your guys' final set of plans, right?
Yeah, these are signed and stamped, so.
Essentially what we're gonna look at probably when you do a building permit, I'm guessing.
If this is approved, nothing will change, other than adding clarification. But
Okay.
we can't change anything without coming back to you, so this would be what we submit unless
Okay.
there's a change.
And then for like a building permit, just because I'm looking at like some of these sheets and just your elevations. One of them says that the corners of the water are going to be 1330 and the existing contours say 1333. So it being 3 feet below what existing is, that's a huge red flag for me. But and I don't know if that's a building permit thing that we address then, or if we just gonna accept it no matter what. I mean, the elevations don't really matter. I mean, that's probably a building permit deal, but,
That's different, drainage and grading is something we typically cover in a building permit.
okay, that's what I figured. Just my inexperience, so I just, so.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Congratulations, guys. Well, first step, I think.
Okay, where did I put my? Can I do both minutes at the same time or separate them out?
You can do them both at the same time.
Okay, got the minutes from July 22nd and September 9th. Has everybody looked at them, see anything needs to be changed? If not, can I get a motion to accept?
Motion to approve the minutes for the September 9th and July 22nd planning commission meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright. Any new business or anything? No? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
Are there any
She going-
issues that